Good evening, everyone. This is Kyle Clapper with BGI. Welcome to our first ever podcast, Talking Golf with BGI. As always, I got Neil Barnhill with me, PGA member and overall golf master. Hey, we got a great show for you tonight, our first ever show. Neil and I are super excited, and we're really excited because of the outstanding, amazing guests that we have with us. A absolute professional within the golf field, Bryan Gathright. Hello, how you doing today, Bryan?
I'm doing terrific, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming today. So Neil and I could not be so excited, could we, Neil? We're just so stoked about having this podcast, aren't we?
We are. I tell you what, you may have the bio on Bryan there, but he's a top 100 instructor for voted by Golf Magazine and Golf Digest. I met him about 3 weeks ago on the phone. I mean, today is the first time I actually saw him through Zoom. But I feel like I've known him for 20 years just in the conversations we've had in the last 3 weeks. And we're super excited for what everybody has in store with this. The stories that Bryan has is unbelievable. I tell you what, it is very intriguing. It's interesting. If you're a golf fan, you're going to love it.
100% right, Neil. It's just going to be so much fun. We got a ton of questions we're going to work through tonight. If I know some of you guys are watching on YouTube and Facebook or Twitch, so if you have any questions, I'm going to be trying to watch in the chat with all three of those things. But Bryan is a true golf professional. He's a top 100 PGA instructor. He's been named the Southern Texas PGA Teacher of the Year back in 1997 and in 2000. He's teach notable professionals like Notah, Begay, and just countless other young and upcoming stars. He's just an absolute amazing golf professional. So to kick things off here, I just kind of want to start off with kind of a general question with you, Bryan. How did you get into teaching? How did you get into using someone's little green book?
Well, it's interesting. Kyle, I kind of backdoored teaching, if there's a way to do that. I grew up in a town of Teague, Texas, 2,500 people, about 90 miles south of Dallas on a 9-hole golf course in Central Texas. And the odds of me being in the golf industry at this point in time, coming from that little 9-hole golf course background, are pretty astronomical. And I ended up playing, not to give you my life history, but I played a couple of years of junior college football. I was a place kicker, actually. And I started playing golf with my college football coaches. And I had a few offers to go to some different schools to place kick. And it turned out that our head coach, who actually retired and lives in San Antonio now, and I still talk to him all the time, and we've laughed about it many times. He actually talked me into staying my final semester at Navarro Junior College in Corsicana, Texas, to play golf. He was starting a golf team, and lo and behold, I made all conference, ended up going to Lamar University on a golf scholarship, and then played professionally for 5 years. And was fortunate enough. I played I played a couple of years of where you could go Monday qualify for the Tournament Players Series Tour, which has now become the Korn Ferry Tour. And then in 1986, I played the Asian Golf Tour. And I was smart enough to know that I was a good player, but I was also smart enough to know I wasn't a great player. And an opportunity came available for me to become the assistant golf professional at Oak Tree Golf Club up in Edmond, Oklahoma. And I'm getting there, guys. I promise. It's a lot easier to get me started than it is to shut me off. But anyway, what ended up happening, we hosted the 1988 PGA Championship there, which was won by Jeff Sluman, and we had a number of great players. That was kind of called the Oak Tree Gang then. Bob Tway had been the 86 PGA Tour Player of the Year. We had Dr. Gil Morgan, we had Doug Toole, Danny Edwards, David Edwards, Willie Wood, so many great players that were, in their heyday at that particular point in time. And it was a great place to work. And then they transferred me from there to PGA West out in La Quinta, California in 1989. And that's where I really got into teaching. We did a tremendous amount of teaching. We had 1,900 members there at the club. I taught a ton out there. And then from there, ended up going to, one of the members actually hired me to go to Aspen, Colorado to run a huge junior golf foundation. We had about 570 kids in the program. We averaged about 300 kids twice a week. We had their own practice facility for them, supported about 10 children's charities. And through that connection, I hired an assistant pro from Corsicana, Texas, who was a friend of mine, and Susan Watkins. And Susan later became the head women's golf coach at the University of Texas, but she had actually worked for Harvey Penick in Austin when she was going to school. She worked at Austin Country Club. She was a tennis player, but she loved golf and played golf. And I'd grown up playing a bunch with her younger brother. And long story short, Susan had found out that Mr. Penick was getting ready to start the Harvey Penick Golf Academy there with Golfsmith there in Austin, and that she suggested that I give him a call. She thought I might be kind of the perfect person they were looking for the job. And lo and behold, went down, interviewed, got the job. And that was, a turning point in my life, to get an opportunity to spend almost 3 years with arguably, if not the greatest, certainly one of the 2 or 3 greatest instructors in the history of the game. And Harvey took such an interest in me, and I was so beneficial to get to spend hundreds of hours with him. And we could do a week-long show on all those stories with getting to spend that time with him. But that certainly was kind of how it evolved and came about. So the odds of me being there, you kind of needed to know the background, and that I truly did, like most people in business and sports and everything. There's that one point in time, that the defining moment in life, and that was one of those things that I was blessed and fortunate enough to get to do that and get to spend time with a legend that actually just took an incredible interest in me and my career and my learning.
Bryan, can I ask you, we talked earlier today, Harvey Penick, for people out there that don't know who he is, he's World Golf Hall of Fame instructor, arguably, like you said, one of the best golf instructors that ever walked this earth. I mean, can you tell me his teaching philosophy and what you learned from him, and how you still use it today?
Well, absolutely. And the thing with Harvey that was incredible, he had the innate ability to say so much and yet so little. And that was the thing that I most pride myself in today, is trying not to complicate the golf swing, trying not to complicate the player's head with too many thoughts. He was a genius in terms of being able to explain things in the most simplistic way. And certainly, he's known for teaching Ben Crenshaw and Tom Kite, but the thing that Harvey's probably not known for, that a few of his pupils, I'll list you 5 pupils, Mickey Wright, Sandra Haney, Sandra Palmer, Betsy Rawls, and Kathy Whitworth, and those 5 ladies won 252 times on the LPGA tour. And
that's ridiculous.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he also, he was also the head golf coach at the University of Texas for 32 years. And
I saw that.
The thing with Harvey that he was so incredibly gifted at was relating to people in such a positive manner. The man didn't have a mean bone in his body, and certainly was able to effectively communicate the most complicated task in the golf swing, and yet the most simplistic way. And the thing that I would take away from that is he learned that you can't teach everyone the same. Probably one of my finest compliments as a teacher, I was at the 2001 U.S. Open at Southern Hills, and I was there with Notah Begay and with Jimmy Walker, who Jimmy and I decided on Monday of the U.S. Open that it'd be a good time to turn pro. And he had qualified as an amateur and turned professional, and ended up, long story, we'll have Jimmy on with us sometimes, but Jimmy shot 66 the second round and made the cut, and kind of the rest is history. But part of that, in doing that, and that week, I had another instructor come up to me and said what I consider today to be my greatest compliment as a teacher. He saw me work with Notah, and then he saw me work with Jimmy, and their body styles were completely different. And he made the comment to me, he said, I got to hand it to you, those 2 guys don't look like they even know the same instructor, and much less work with the same person. And that was that was what I considered my finest compliment, because I can assure you that's how Harvey Penick operated, and certainly as successful as all the players he's worked with throughout his career that he did. Obviously Ben Crenshaw and Tom Kite are two incredibly, successful Hall of Fame players, yet they're as different as daylight and dark in terms of their approach to practice and playing the game and everything about it. And that was the genius of Harvey Penick.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I tell you what, that's just unbelievable that you were able to work with him, and and you still carry his message and how his imprint on. I tell you, not only you, I think a lot of instructors out there still today, are affected by what he did and all the great writing he did in the last part of his life. I mean, that's incredible how many books he wrote towards the end of his life.
Well, it really was, and that's a story in itself. In that, when Bud Shrake actually approached Harvey about doing the first book, the Little Red Book, well, he was pretty excited about it and everything. But Harvey would, and this isn't me saying this. This is what Harvey said about himself. He said, he lived a simple life. He said he'd either been caddying or around, Austin Country Club the majority of his life. I mean, since he was a little boy when he began caddying out there, and then he became head golf professional and held that until he became, head golf pro emeritus, and his son Tinsley took over. But anyway, in that regard, well, Harvey just, he was excited about this opportunity to write this book, and Harvey and Helen, his wife, were talking about it, and she was kind of keeping him grounded and said, well, who do you think's going to buy this book? And Harvey said, well, a few, I know probably most of the members will, and a few people, my friends around Austin and everything. And so Bud comes back all excited to meet with him, because he had visited with Simon & Schuster and actually had gotten a $10,000 advance for Harvey to write the book. Well, this is an absolute true story. And when Bud mentioned it to Harvey, well, it kind of threw him off, and he said, well, do you mind stepping out and let Helen and I discuss it a little bit and everything? And when Bud came back in the room, well, the interesting thing about it was Harvey said, Bud, I just don't think I'm going to be up to doing this book and everything. And I appreciate everything you've done, but I just don't think we can do it. And what Bud, thank God at that point in time, Bud asked him, he said, well, Harvey, you were so excited about this. What happened? I thought you would be excited to get a $10,000 bonus. This was back in the early 90s. And that's, plus the rights to the book and everything. And Harvey looked at him and he said, well, Bud, I've lived a pretty modest life and I've saved well, but I just don't know if I can pay $10,000 to get this book published. I don't think we'll sell that many of them. And when Bud explained to him that, no, he was going to be the receiver of the $10,000 signing bonus, well, it went a little different way. And the Little Red Book became the number one selling sports book of all time at that particular point. And it was genius in its simplicity. I had the great fortune of having the opportunity to he had a red scribble text notebook that, and if you've seen his book, any of the books, it was just like that in the scribble text notebook. Bud Shrake, who passed away not too many years ago, did a magnificent job of writing that book as it was, because what Harvey would do when he would work with a player and found something that worked, he just made some notes and put it in this old scribble text notebook, and he carried it with him, and he never let anybody see it or anything. And he didn't like for players to be there when he was working with other players. He really liked to keep things between he and that particular player. And but that's the honest to God truth on that with the book. When he thought he was going to have to pay, and once he got
great.
that, well, it turned out to be a pretty good deal for him, and he signed so many of those books over the years, and always personalized them. Was just an incredible human being, and all of his pupils, I will tell you, that had the pleasure to work with him, would absolutely tell you that yes, they learned a tremendous amount about playing the game of golf, but more importantly, they learned so much about being a better person and being a person, an ambassador of the game of golf. And certainly if I can leave a mark there's no way you can leave a footprint like he did. But if I can just leave a small mark in the game of golf that I learned from him, well, that's certainly something that I'd be very proud of to take with me.
Yeah, it just seems like there's so many amazing life lessons there in the game, and it's just and Harvey's impact and your impact is just something that will last for years and years to come. So as we continue doing this, guys, we want to make sure to thank all our viewers on YouTube. This is our first time doing this. If you ever thought about supporting BGI, just go ahead and look down on the links. We work with a lot of amazing companies: Wilson Golf, FlightScope, the RNT, the WEC method, all these amazing companies. Please go ahead and support those companies. And if you like what you hear here today, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. So let's move into it. Let's talk about the famous Notah Begay. How did you start teaching Notah? How did you start doing it? Because Neals already hinted at me. This is a great story here.
Well, it's very interesting. Notah was a fantastic player, and in college he was an All-American at Stanford. Grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and went to Academy High School there. The reservation is half Navajo and half Pueblo Indian, and he grew up playing golf at a municipal course called Ladera Municipal there in Albuquerque. And Don Zamora, who was the golf professional there when Notah was growing up, used to let Notah come out and pick up. He'd let him go out into the bushes and pick up the balls and hit them back out into the range. And in turn, he would allow Notah to hit a bucket of. If he'd go pick them up, he'd allow him to hit them and everything on the range, and taught him a great work ethic. And Notah grew up playing not only golf, but he was an all-state soccer player and an all-state basketball player. He's a heck of an athlete, but. When he was a junior, Stanford won the NCAA championship, and he came back for his senior year. They added some guy from Southern California named Tiger Woods to their team and didn't graduate anybody. Yeah, some guy named Tiger Woods, and that's that's a story for Notah, and when we get him on sometime soon, because they added Tiger Woods, didn't lose a player, and they actually finished second in the NCAAs the following year. And Notah had missed a putt on the 72nd hole that would have tied the team championship and put him into a playoff. And it wasn't a short putt, but if you knew Notah at all the way I do, you know he takes everything to heart. He's a winner and a champion and all he's ever done. And it really shook him. And his teacher was moving to Okinawa, was in the military from Albuquerque there to Okinawa, and he had gotten really involved in Mo Norman's methods of teaching, and he convinced Notah that this was the thing to do and that he would, be better as a result of it and everything. And Notah was struggling with the change. You take a guy that's been an All-American and all of a sudden you totally change philosophy. You go to the wide stance and flat-footed and the bigger grip and all the things that go with it. And he was just struggling to play. And he was visiting Don Zamora here, who had moved to San Antonio, and Don was out at a place called Tapatio Springs in Boerne, Texas. And Don wanted Notah to come out and watch me teach. Don had actually heard me speak at a section PGA teaching seminar, and he thought it might be a good fit, and he asked Notah to come out, and Notah didn't want to do it, but he reluctantly said, well, what if I go watch him teach for a while, and then if I like what he says, I'll talk to him. And Don called me that night before at home and said, hey, would you mind if Notah came out and watched you teach? And as I told Neal this earlier, my thoughts would be, okay, yeah, he'll probably come out and watch a couple of lessons maybe, and if he likes what he hears, we'll talk or whatever at the end of the day. And long story short, Notah was there before I was that morning and watched me teach all day long. He took a little bit of a break, ran to get something to eat, came back, watched me give every lesson, and I was booked from like 8 to 6. And then I stayed, and he asked me, he said he liked what he saw. He liked how I kept things simple, and kind of liked the philosophy that I didn't try to change everything on all the players, and I didn't try to teach everybody the same way. And he asked me, would I watch him hit a few balls? And I did. I watched him, and I suggested we might narrow his stance a little bit. He had a 10-finger grip at the time, and I didn't change that. And that goes back to my time with Harvey. Notah has fairly small hands, real short arms and small hands, and we didn't change the 10-finger grip at that particular point in time. And anyway, we had a good session. I watched him hit balls and worked with him for probably an hour and a half. And as I was telling Neal earlier, I didn't hear from him for about 3.5 months after that meeting. So I had assumed it didn't go very well, and he'd moved on, and that was that. And I got a phone call out of the blue. My office manager walked out onto the range and said, Notah Begay's on the phone and just insists that I interrupt you. I was in the middle of the lesson. So I excused myself, walked in, and he wanted to know if I'd be willing to fly to Albuquerque to see him. And we talked about it for a few minutes and figured out a time, and he flew me out to Albuquerque to work with him. I think we worked for 3 days out there. And then I didn't hear from him for about 3 more months. And I mean, not a word. Total ghosted me for I talked to him, I guess, 4 days in 6 months, and they were 1 day, and then 3 months later for 3 days, and then nothing. And then I get a call from him because I had noticed that he had gotten conditional status on what was then the Nike Tour, which is now the Korn Ferry Tour. And I get a phone call, and Notah said, hey, I really want you to know things are just really starting to work great, and I'd like for you to be my teacher. And that's when I kind of put my foot down and said, look, if what we've been doing is being your teacher, that's not going to work for me. And long story short, we started working full time. And I tell this story because that was the beginning of 1998 now, because this had started back in 1997. And now he's got conditional status in early 1998 on the Nike Tour then. And I can't remember. I think I went back out to Albuquerque again. I'd seen him a couple more times since then, and went back out to Albuquerque. And when I was out there, he told me, he said, if I could just get in 3 straight events, I really feel like I could do something special. And the third consecutive event was Virginia. And he shot 59 and finished second in that event.
Wow.
Went on for 3 more second-place finishes, secured his card in 1998 for the 1999 PGA Tour season. And then before his injury, he won more times in 1999 and 2000 worldwide than anyone except Tiger Woods. And we went from I would say a situation where it was a very meager start in business relationship to, we were flying private 2 years later. So it was a pretty fast track from there. But there's not a better human being on the planet. There's no one that I think more of than Notah. And he's like a second son to me. And we talk all the time. We spend time together when he's in San Antonio. And I'm excited to say I think you'll be seeing a little bit of him here in the next year or so on the Champions Tour, because I think he's missing competing. And now that he can ride in a cart, because his back injury really didn't affect his golf swing nearly as bad as it did walking. Walking was extremely difficult on him. And I think he'll do well out there. He's a wonderful human being, a wonderful man, and a great dad and a great father and husband. And I can't say enough nice things about him. And he and I kind of grew up together. Me as a teacher and him as a player. I was kind of an unheard of teacher. And the next thing you know, we had a lot of fun kind of going head to head against the best players on the planet.
Oh, that's an incredible story. I mean, he's one heck of a commentator. He's doing an unbelievable job on Golf Channel as well. So, I mean, he sounds like a great person. Hopefully we can get him on our podcast. That'd be an awesome podcast to have him on.
I will set that up. I promise you.
All right, Kyle, you got another question?
Well, I do, because I'm just blown away by that. I mean,
I told you.
And the best part is I just love hearing about amazing people, and speaking of going from one amazing person, let's go on to another one. And I kind of completely flew past this, and did introductions, but
yeah,
Jimmy Walker. Can we find a nicer guy on tour right now?
There's not a nicer guy, and it's really funny. Most most players and coaches that have a 12-year relationship that ends as a business relationship doesn't evolve into the coach teaching their wife and son. So if that can tell you anything about mine and Jimmy's relationship, well, I can't say enough nice things about him. Jimmy is a class act and has been very, very good to me. And hopefully we didn't do everything wrong, because he's been a heck of a player and a heck of a friend and someone that, again, he was a junior in college at Baylor when he and I started working, and we worked together for about 12 years. He was Nationwide Tour Player of the Year while we were working together. We took a brief hiatus for about a year and then got back together for 5 or 6 more years. And he soared in terms of success on tour. And hey, if a player's going to fire a coach to go to somebody else, if you're getting fired to go for that player to go to Butch Harmon, well, Butch and I are friends as well. And certainly I have nothing but the finest to say for what they were able to accomplish. The one thing that I think Jimmy would tell you is that I'd told him for years he was going to be a top 10 world player. He was going to be, win majors and win great things and win golf tournaments. And when Butch told him, I think he believed him. I think that was the biggest difference, that maybe Butch had a little more credibility than I did in terms of his belief of that. But to this day, I get, the opportunity to see him. He lives at Cordillera where I work. I see him all the time, and we converse and talk, whenever he's in town, and I couldn't say enough nice things about him.
Just seeing him win the PGA Tour, and then obviously after that struggling with Lyme disease was hard to watch. But he hearing you talk about him really just reinforced the type of person he is. So kind of going off of that a little bit there, because I got 2 amazing coaches with me right here, Neal and Bryan. You guys are just, Bryan, you've helped me so much with my game and helped so many different juniors. So Bryan, on your stance, how does it go from working with amateurs, myself or beginners, and then working with someone like a Jimmy Walker, like a Notah Begay? Like how do you go from working with them, and what kind of differences exist between teaching them? Obviously, there's some obviously swing characteristic differences, but what's your teaching mentality when it comes to that?
Well, there's a couple of things, Kyle, that I think are incredibly important. I think the one thing that you take back and you go back to that time I spent with Harvey. Harvey loved seeing a beginner get the golf ball in the air for the first time. I mean, he truly got a passion and a joy out of seeing that happen and seeing families impacted, that, he knew that he caused the husband and the wife and the kids to enjoy the game of golf together. And I don't know, Neal, I would like to hear your comments on it, but I think I would get bored if I worked just strictly with tour players or just strictly with great players. It keeps you fresh. It keeps you thinking of new ways to communicate. And the one thing, I guess, maybe it's my simplistic approach with the good players. I try to keep it as simple with the best players on the planet as I do with the beginning golfer. And I just feel like under pressure, that has a tendency to last better and be a lot easier to dig in and get, as opposed to a real complex, complicated swing thought. It's not that you don't understand those things. It's not that you don't explain those things to your best players and certainly those players playing at the highest level, but you also want them to be able to perform. And to do that, I think it's got to be my players that I've worked with forever joke and tease me because I constantly ask them what they feel when they hit a great shot. And they tease me about it, but I'm 100% serious about it because I want them to be able to reproduce a feeling under pressure versus trying to do something complicated and mechanical. And so,
Bryan, what you're saying there about the feeling, I mean, Kyle attests when we first met, I looked at his swing, actually his setup on the iPad, and he's laughing, but I mean, his left shoulder was open. So there's about 5 things wrong with his setup.
We don't have long enough show to go through everything wrong with my swing. We don't have a long enough show.
But anyways, So I was like, hey, change these setup points. You're going to have to, work on it at home. You can do it while you're watching TV or whatever. Just get these setup points, and then let's get it at one swing thought. He took it way inside. I was like, let's just get that takeaway better. Let's just get the setup right, get the takeaway, get that feel. And, it was something he could immediately take to the course. And that's kind of been my teaching philosophy all these years. The KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. I personally believe that, you give somebody a golf lesson, yeah, they got stuff to work on, but they need to be able to go, if they're going to play in 2 or 3 days, hopefully they can play a little bit better. It's not that I don't want to tear them down to where they hate the game. I want them to be able to go out there and enjoy playing. Otherwise, why are they doing it? So that's always been at the forefront of my thinking when I'm teaching someone, and also finding out how their learning style. It's everybody's different. That's what keeps me going. Is every person that you give a lesson to is different and how they learn. And so
I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, Neil, that's one of the great things about our game, and that is, and that's what I meant by keeping it fresh and keeping us fresh. I'm sure, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, but when I see a player come through in my next lesson, it looks like, they may have a similar tendency. Boy, I'll go doubly long before I'll say anything, because I always, want to be careful as a teacher that you're not looking for something that okay, I just spent an hour working with this player on this. What's the odds? Is this a coincidence that this other person's fighting an inside takeaway, or, fighting a weak left-hand grip, or a target, alignment, or whatever that case may be? Because I think it's so easy as a teacher to paint yourself in a box, and I really pride myself in staying outside of that. And I think seeing all different layers and levels of players like you're talking. Do you catch yourself, Neil, doing the same thing where you really, I'm overly cautious when I see something that looks similar to something I've already seen, even the same day?
I agree. Everybody's different. I've had an autistic kid, so his style setup, you get his knees flexed, and, like I call it, the tail feathers, and his back's rounded, you get that fixed. And I mean, he's totally different than the next guy, but yeah, like you have 2 or 3 in a row where they're inside. It's so easy to as an instructor to be like, all right, you got to do this, and say the same thing. But you know what? The thing is, maybe they need to go all straight or back, but how they learn and how you got to illustrate it to them. I think that's what you're saying too, or talk to them about it. Is totally different. You can't tell them the same way. It may be the same takeaway thing, but how you've got to verbalize it and communicate it to them is different for each person.
And I got to jump in there. I got to jump in there too and give Neil some props, because this obviously, Neil and I do this, and kind of a side thing, but my main job is an educator, and Neil's energy with these kids. It's not just his ability to be technical and get them where they need to be and have fun, but it's just his energy, and it's his excitement and his joy. I mean, every time I go out there and I'm like practicing, and Neil's working with a junior or any type of person, his energy is infectious. And I think that plays to his ability to reach these kids. And I see so many people, other coaches not have that level of energy, and they're not as successful. They might have the right ideas, but with Neil and with good coaches, it's just that energy, that connection they make with kids. I mean, Brian, I know you do that with your students.
Well, I will tell you, I do pride myself in that. And, I get as excited as I can't tell you when they succeed. I've been fortunate. I've had 10 players win the Texas State High School Individual Championship. And this year I've got a young man that he hadn't won the State High School Championship yet, but he won the State Junior. And I'm so excited when I get those phone calls or get the opportunity on a rare occasion to be there when they win one of those events. And it's so encouraging to see young people, Neil will tell you, as I will, they work their tails off to get to a certain point. And when you know that they've achieved a goal in winning a state championship or winning a tournament or getting a college scholarship, I pride myself in always trying to be at their signing parties, because I think you've made that journey with those players, and I'm very fortunate in that I've gotten to go to a ton of those signing parties, and a lot of times where a bunch of them are on the same day, and I'm running around like crazy getting to them. But it's important, because you are a part of their life and a part of their family's life, and I can't tell you what that means as a teacher. I don't think anyone that does a decent job in this business, if they don't have that energy, they need to do something else, because that's the most important thing I learned from Harvey Penick. Harvey had the energy to teach and learn up until his last breath, and I think that's the thing that you always want to try to translate. The message is the message, but how it's delivered, as Neal said, that's the critical element, and that's what's going to make them excited. And change is not easy. It's, as you very well know, Kyle, it's hard to make a change. I don't care what you're doing in the game of golf. If you're trying to change something, it's not easy. So you better believe in what you're doing. You better have conviction and passion, and you better also have someone that's willing to get in the trenches and make that journey with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's awesome. It's so awesome. It's just, you guys are outstanding coaches. Neal's helped me so much, and it's a wonderful experience to see them make that journey. So,
yeah.
All right,
hey, Kyle, let me jump in.
Of course.
Piggyback off what you said there. I mean, I know it's one of the questions coming, but probably one of the most gratifying things, I think Kyle can attest to this. There's a couple of kids, where I coached a golf team, and about 3 years I've been able to, because I have some training certificates in CrossFit and weightlifting. Mm-hmm. So after season, I trained some of the golf team members with weightlifting, conditioning, flexibility, mobility. And so it's a year-long project, and they take lessons. And I mean, there's a few that, hey, they aren't the top players score-wise, but I've seen them come from not even being able to break 60 to shooting in the 40s. And also, they're so confident in themselves from where they were 3 years ago to be able to carry a conversation and walk around campus with their chest up. I mean, to me, I'm getting chills just talking about it, because to me, that's everything about what we're doing. I mean, you may not make it on tour, but just I've been able to imprint and help, some of these kids. It's invaluable. I mean, it takes my heart away when I see that happen, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Well, you guys are doing something for these kids. You're helping them grow, not just with a club in their hand, but with them realizing, their potential, realizing a goal, whether it's to break 50, to break 40, to break par, whatever it may be. I mean, you guys, the amount of impact you guys have cannot be measured by the score on that card. So I'm kind of going with that. Neal has made impact on, I couldn't even count how many junior players and adult players. But with you, Bryan, what is out of, being that top 100 instructor, being that 2-time Southern Texas PGA Teacher of the Year, what would be your greatest accomplishment in golf that maybe we haven't heard about? Or maybe we have heard about it, but maybe kind of take us through that.
Well, there's a couple of things that I look back on, mentoring young instructors. I have one of my closest friends, and I probably talked to a gentleman named Scott House, who is actually the director of instruction at Westwood Country Club in Houston now. And when I was at Oak Hills Country Club in San Antonio in the early 2000s, Scott was a young assistant golf professional. And the life of an assistant at a private country club, he was working probably 60 hours a week and trying to play golf with the members and balance life and everything else. But every time he had a free second, Scott would come out and watch me teach and ask questions, and I'd tell him why I was doing what I was doing with a particular player. And we kept doing that, and we kept doing it, and I kept encouraging him to do it. And I will tell you, and this is not me saying this, but this is Scott will tell you, his claim to fame right now is he thinks he's the second busiest teacher in the state of Texas, and I'll let you figure out who he thinks the busiest guy is. So, but he's done great. He's got a wonderful delivery. He's got a bunch of outstanding young players, and he is busy in Houston. He does a great job. And I've always told people, if you can call and get a lesson with a teacher the very next day, I'm not sure you want it. And Scott's definitely one of those that he stays booked well in advance. And that I'm very proud of. I'm extremely proud to know that I impacted a guy and really changed him from wanting to be a club pro to changing people's lives in the game. And then another one that I'm extremely proud of right now is a young lady named Cece Buford. And Cece, trust me, guys, you'll want to remember her name because she's going to be an all-time great, I predict, right now in women's college golf in coaching. She came to me. Her dad was at the time the GM of the San Antonio Spurs. He's now the president of the San Antonio Spurs, R.C. Buford. And I'd known her since literally she was an infant. She and my son are about 18 days apart in age, and we'd met in Colorado at a charity event I was running. And Cece was the two-time San Antonio private school player of the year in basketball and in volleyball. And her mom, Beth, used to be Boozer, but Beth Buford was she won the European Order of Merit, got her LPGA card, played successful all over the world, just a wonderful golfer, had been in Golf Digest a number of times. And anyway, long story short, Cece came to me right before her senior year in high school, and Beth, her mom, and I had been begging her to play golf, and she'd played golf once a year. She went to a private high school, and she'd played once a year so they'd have enough girls to compete. And Cece ended up coming to me in August and said, I don't think I want to play college basketball or volleyball. I want to play golf. And Neal, you can imagine the look in me. Now, you're talking about a kid that couldn't break probably it'd have been a stretch for her to break 100 from the ladies' tees anywhere. And now she wants to play college golf. And, we've been begging her to play for the last 4 years and we couldn't get her to. But anyway, I told her, I said, Cece, this is something's going to be extremely hard to do. I was very honest with her. Her mom had been very honest with her. I knew that they wouldn't need a college scholarship, but I encouraged her. I said, you know what, let's do? I said, let's take 90 days. Let's see how serious you are about this, and let's see how good you can get. Well, 90 days later, she was shooting in the 70s.
Wow.
She's an incredible athlete. She started in the spring shooting the 70s in some tournaments. She started having great success individually, winning some high school tournaments.
Hey, Bryan, stop you right there.
Yes, sir.
All right. So when she started working with you, this would be good for me and hopefully some of the kid juniors I work with. How many days a week does she practice, and how many hours a day does she practice to get to that 70?
First off, she probably came out twice a week for lessons, and when she wasn't in school, when she was not actually in class, she was practicing. And to the point, they had a putting green at their house. They were working at night on her short game. I mean, she worked nonstop.
So she was going 7 to 10 hours a day then.
Absolutely. And then, and she worked through it. She was working as hard as she could. And of course, when the time came in the end of the spring, now she's got some success as a high school golfer. Well, I'll let you guess. I don't have to tell you how hard it is to even find a school that would even talk to her about letting her walk on. And Jamie Petrell, who's the women's coach at College of Charleston, ended up, we had a connection. I had a player from San Antonio that I'd taught that played on the men's team, and we reached out to Jamie and said, look, Jamie, all I ask, I want you to redshirt her. She's not even close to ready to play college golf yet. I said, but I'd love for you to redshirt her. And if she's not good enough in a year, I said, you don't even have to buy her a bag. I said, her parents will buy the bag. I mean, all it's going to take is you just going to let her go to practice with the girls. Well, he looked at it as, hey, what could it hurt? We'd send him some swing video. By now she was, it was easy to see she's a tall athlete. If she was a volleyball and basketball player, she's athletic. That that both she and I knew how much, it was going to take, but also she had a mom that had played the LPGA Tour. So Jamie knew we weren't just, throwing things out there. We both had a little bit of credibility that we knew what the benchmark was. And of course I'd taught Dorothy Dellison, who'd played the LPGA Tour and been very successful. And so we knew that Cece had some talent, but anyway, long story short, she became, in her 5th year, she was female athlete of the year at the College of Charleston. She won a college tournament. She qualified for the USAM, missed the match play by a stroke. One of the great success stories ever. And from a basketball background, the first thing she wanted to do when she got out, she wanted to become a coach. And she was like a grad assistant at College of Charleston. Then she moved to assistant coach at Campbell University, and was being heavily recruited by a number of top schools, and I'll leave their names out, but trust me, they're big-time programs all over the country that was trying to talk Cece into coming as an assistant coach for them. And the head coach at Campbell this last summer reached out to her and said, before you take this job, I think you might ought to go talk to East Carolina. They've contacted me about you becoming the head women's coach at East Carolina. And she has done that. She's done a marvelous job. They won their first tournament for her as a head coach. The girls love her. They've been super successful, and obviously this year's gotten cut short. But to have a girl that I spent so much time with and worked so much with, that I know what kind of an individual she is, and I know how impactful she is, and I'm so excited because I've actually got a couple of players that she's looking at now, and that's something about me that goes a long way in terms of what makes me tick. To think that, we've done some things with her game that now she's impacting the lives of so many young people. I can't tell you how proud of those two people I am. And there's a whole bunch more, but those two stand out above and beyond.
Well, that's a great story, Bryan. I'll tell you what, that you can go to sleep every night knowing you've done everything you can, and you left a special imprint on a lot of people's lives. And you know what? Nobody can take that away from you. So, I mean, kudos to you, man, and what you do. That's just awesome.
Well, it certainly, it's great. And going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of working with young people, working with tour players, the great thing about working with a tour player is you can see the success in the newspaper on Monday with the money list. Now you can see it instantly online with everything, with PGAtour.com and everything else. But I've never been afraid to do that with players. I can think back to a story with Notah. He struggled the first round of the U.S. Open in 2000 at Pebble Beach, and he's coming off a 38th place finish at the Masters, and shot 77 the first round of the Open at Pebble, and was kind of down in the dumps, wasn't playing well, kind of feeling sorry for himself. And he and I went up to Spyglass, and we had a nice little visit. We didn't even go to the range at Pebble. We went up to Spyglass, visited for a while up on the putting green behind the 10th hole, and I'll just leave it at that. I kind of reminded him how lucky we were. We were at Pebble Beach playing in the U.S. Open. Things could be worse. And we went back down to the range at Pebble. I knew he was getting out in front of it. He was getting the club stuck, and we did I suggested he try a drill, and he sat there, Notah being Notah. He did that drill for about an hour and a half, and goes out the next day in a pretty severe wind, shoots 70. He went out early, shot 72 under, and we went back to the room there at the lodge at Pebble and watched the wind blow, and watched him go from, I think, 118th place or something like that to making the cut. And then he played good the next 2 days, finished 22nd in the U.S. Open, and then won the next 2 weeks. So it can change in a hurry. And that's a point where, as a teacher, as you know, and as I say a teacher, I think what you and I do, Neal, I certainly pride myself in being a coach far more than I do a teacher. And trust me, I know Kyle, you're a teacher, and if you talk to your pupils the way I talk to him on that putting green up there, you probably wouldn't have had a job. So
probably.
We had quite a coach player conversation, to say the least. But anyway, the thing that happened with that is knowing that you have to keep it simple. You have to give them a positive, something that they can do, right, wrong, or indifferent. And certainly I can tell you those next 2 weeks were a whole lot of fun watching him go out and win back to back, and and then qualify to make the President's Cup team. And he and Tiger, are in the President's Cup playing Ernie Els and Vijay Singh. And they beat them twice, and then he beat Retief Goosen in the singles. So it was an amazing run, amazing year, and we'll get his version on it soon.
Such a great impact. I mean, just so amazing. So, all right, as we move into our last question, I just want to remind everyone, if you like what you hearing today, like what you're viewing today on the different streams, make sure to hit that like, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And then also, if you want to help support BGI and help support some amazing companies, go ahead and look down in the description found underneath the live stream right now on on YouTube, and make sure to support those amazing companies, because golf might be on a little bit of a hiatus right now, but golf is going to come back with a fire. So all right, so we're talking a lot about the past today, but let's talk about the future. What's the plan for the next few years for Bryan Gathright? What's the plan?
Well, hopefully we're going to get through this virus and get back to doing something that we all love, and that's the passion of playing the game and teaching the game of golf. But we're pretty excited. We haven't truly announced this. There are a lot of people that know about it right now.
What better place to announce it, Bryan, than Talking Golf with BGI's first episode?
How about that? But the interesting thing, I have one of my dearest and closest friends is a gentleman named Rafael Alarcon. And Rafael, the best way I've described it, Rafael to Neals. He is the Butch Harmon of Latin America. But Rafael was a player at Oklahoma State back in the 80s, won a national championship at Oklahoma State, went on, played the PGA Tour, played all over the world, and I had the good fortune to get to work with Rafael some as a player, and then we became great friends. And lo and behold, Rafael started telling me years ago about this little 9-year-old girl that showed a lot of promise down in Guadalajara, Mexico. And that little 9-year-old girl turned out to be someone named Lorena Ochoa. And Rafael was Lorena's only teacher. And when he first started working with her, we would look at videos and different things he would talk about, because he was a little bit unsure of himself as a teacher at that point in time, but just because of an experience basis, not because of a knowledge, but the experience. And Rafael has produced so many great players out of Mexico and all of Latin America, and he's just an incredible guy. And he and I have talked about it for a long time. We've got like views as far as the golf, teaching the game of golf. We're very like-minded. We're great friends. We're the same age, and we're looking forward. We're going to hopefully here in the next year or so. This virus has kind of put us behind on some things, on announcing some things, but in the next year, we're looking forward to opening an international golf academy where we're going to keep it very small. He and I are going to be very involved in it, and try to teach some of these values that we both believe in so strongly, and have players both from the U.S. and from all over the world actually come and learn the game, and most importantly, get an education to becoming better humans, better ambassadors of the game of golf, and most importantly, the impact that they'll have on their families and their future children, and hopefully leave a mark on the game of golf.
Outstanding. So such an amazing story. The opportunity to make such outstanding impact. So again, if you want to help support BGI, go ahead and smash that like and subscribe button. So, hey, Neal, closing thoughts, bud.
Bryan, I tell you what, I'm glad I met your son, Hunter, True Speed, led me into conversation with you. And I tell you what, it's just a blessing. The contacts you get, like this was at the PGA show, some of the people you meet, and then you meet another person, and leads to, someone like you. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just amazing to be, associated with somebody of your character. And I look forward to our partnership and our friendship. And hopefully I get to meet you. I want me and Kyle come out there and maybe play some golf.
There you go.
For the years to come. So I'm really, truly, I'm so happy that this friendship started.
Oh, well, I can't tell you how excited I am. And one of the other things you asked me about from an excitement point of view, I'm so proud of my son Hunter and his business partner Derek Lobica, who and the things that they've come about with True Speed Golf and seeing the impact that they're having in providing something that's making players better. And I'd love to take a bunch of credit for it, and I can't take any credit for it. All they did was come to me with an idea and ask me what I think. And as you have seen personally, and certainly as I've seen on a number of occasions, that True Speed Golf's making a huge impact in getting players better, which is what we're all about.
We'll have Hunter on the show, and we'll talk in depth about the True Speed training aid. We'll leave it at that. We'll tease everybody with that. We won't tell them too much information. So, Kyle?
Hey, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Bryan, so much for joining us on our first ever Talking Golf with BGI. This is going to be an amazing partnership, not only to expand knowledge on golf, but to, as you guys both, Neal and you, Bryan, talk about the impact of golf, the impact beyond just the scorecard. So again, if you guys enjoyed what you hear today, Neal and I are going to be having a multitude of different guests. We're going to definitely have Bryan back on the show with a bunch of other different guests, Jimmy Walker, possibly Notah Begay, all those amazing people. And again, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys in the next episode of Talking Golf with BGI.